What if the fruit bowl on your kitchen counter right now holds foods that kings, prophets, and healers once considered sacred medicine? Most people don't know this, but thousands of years before pharmacies existed, before lab coats and clinical trials, there was a diet already written down, one meal, one harvest, one fruit at a time, in the pages of the Bible. And while we're all reaching for supplements shipped from overseas, some of the most studied, most nutrient-dense fruits on the planet have been sitting in Scripture the entire time, mentioned by name, generation after generation. Today I'm walking you through 20 of them, the fruits that fed prophets, sustained armies, and were valuable enough to be given as gifts to kings. And I'm going to show you exactly why modern nutrition science keeps landing right back on the same conclusions ancient people reached, with nothing but observation and time. Stick around, because number 13 on this list was so rare in the ancient world that only priests were permitted to use it in temple ritual, and today, researchers are studying a compound in it that barely exists anywhere else in nature. And number 20 appears in Scripture over 500 times, more than any other plant in the entire Bible, and it might be the most misunderstood fruit on this whole list. If ancient wisdom crossed with real modern research is something you want more of, hit that subscribe button right now, because we post a new one of these every single week. Alright, let's get into it. Here are 20 biblical fruits that ancient cultures trusted to support real, lasting health, ranked from remarkable to extraordinary. 1. Olive. Let's start where the ancient world started, with the olive. The Bible references olive oil over 140 times. Kings were anointed with it. Wounds were dressed with it. In Luke chapter 10, the Good Samaritan pours oil and wine directly into a stranger's wounds, not as ritual, but as first-century first aid. Here's what modern research has actually confirmed. Extra virgin olive oil is one of the most rigorously studied foods in nutrition science. The Mediterranean diet, built around it, has been linked across hundreds of studies to lower rates of heart disease and reduced markers of chronic inflammation. In 2005, researchers at Monell Chemical Senses Center identified a compound in fresh, high-quality olive oil called oleocanthal and found it inhibits the same inflammatory pathway that ibuprofen does. That's not folklore. That's a paper published in Nature. The traditional use was simple: cold-pressed, unfiltered olive oil, taken daily, poured generously over food, and applied topically to skin. Ancient people didn't take supplements. This was the supplement. 2. Fig. Here's a detail most people miss. In 2 Kings chapter 20, King Hezekiah is dying of a severe skin infection. The prophet Isaiah doesn't just pray over him. He instructs that a poultice of figs be pressed onto the wound, and Hezekiah recovers. Modern science has actually caught up to that instruction. Figs contain phycin, a proteolytic enzyme that breaks down damaged tissue, along with compounds shown in lab studies to have antimicrobial activity. Fresh fig latex has been studied for its effects on skin healing specifically. Beyond wound care, figs are exceptionally rich in soluble fiber, particularly pectin, which feeds beneficial gut bacteria, along with meaningful amounts of magnesium, potassium, and calcium. Traditional use. Fresh figs eaten at peak ripeness for gut and mineral support. Dried figs for shelf-stable year-round nutrition, and mashed fresh figs applied topically. The same practice Scripture records 3,000 years ago. 3. Date. If you were a trader, a soldier, or a pilgrim crossing the ancient Middle East, dates kept you alive. The date palm is mentioned more than almost any other fruit tree in Scripture, not for beauty, but because it fed people. Dates deliver fast-acting natural sugars alongside fiber, potassium, magnesium, copper, and B vitamins, a combination that blunts the blood sugar spike you'd get from refined sugar alone. Multiple clinical studies out of the Middle East have examined dates consumed in late pregnancy and found associations with shorter labor and smoother deliveries, a genuinely interesting area of ongoing research. Dates also contain polyphenols with documented antioxidant activity. Traditional use is almost embarrassingly simple: 3 to 5 dates as a fast, sustained energy source, which is exactly why Ramadan fasting is traditionally broken with them to this day. 4. Pomegranate. The pomegranate shows up in the architecture of Solomon's temple itself. 200 carved pomegranates on the temple pillars, according to 1 Kings chapter 7. That wasn't decoration. That was a statement about what this fruit represented. Modern antioxidant research is fascinated by it, for good reason. Pomegranates contain punicolagens, compounds found in very few other foods, which break down in the gut into metabolites called urolithins, a family of compounds currently being studied for anti-inflammatory effects. Clinical trials on pomegranate juice have shown measurable reductions in blood pressure and markers of LDL oxidation in some populations. Traditional use. Seeds eaten fresh, juice pressed and consumed immediately, and the rind, often discarded today, steeped as a tea, historically used across the Middle East for digestive complaints. 5. Grape. I am the vine, you are the branches. Jesus' own words in John chapter 15. Grapes appear at Noah's first act after the flood, throughout the Song of Solomon, in nearly every agricultural metaphor in the Gospels. Fresh grapes contain resveratrol, concentrated mainly in the skin, a polyphenol that has been one of the most heavily studied compounds in cardiovascular and aging research for 2 decades. Studies link regular grape and grape skin polyphenol intake to improved markers of vascular health. Traditional use. Fresh grapes in season, raisins for portable year-round nutrition, and grape leaves used both as food wrappers and, in traditional Mediterranean practice, for inflammatory conditions, a use that's still part of regional cuisine today. 6. Raisins. Raisins get their own mention. In 1 Samuel chapter 25, Abigail brings King David 200 cakes of raisins as a peace offering, alongside grain and wine, in a moment meant to diffuse a violent conflict. That tells you what value this food carried. Because raisins are concentrated grapes, they carry a denser dose of iron, potassium, and fiber per bite, though some heat-sensitive polyphenols are reduced in the drying process. What raisins offer that fresh grapes don't is shelf stability, which is exactly why they became a staple for soldiers, travelers, and anyone crossing long desert distances. Traditional use. Eaten whole as a portable energy source, or soaked in water overnight to soften and rehydrate. 7. Apples/quince. Comfort me with apples, for I am lovesick. Song of Solomon chapter 2 verse 5. Most biblical scholars actually believe this refers to the quince, native to the region, since true apples were rare in the ancient Near East. Either way, this fruit was tied directly to comfort and restoration. Quince is exceptionally high in pectin, even more so than apples, which supports gut motility and has been traditionally used to soothe digestive upset. It's also rich in vitamin C and polyphenols with antioxidant activity documented in lab studies. Traditional use. Quince cooked into a soft paste or syrup, since it's astringent and largely inedible raw, then used both as food and as a traditional remedy for digestive discomfort. 8. Melon. In Numbers 11, the Israelites in the wilderness weep for the food they left behind in Egypt, and melons make the list by name. That's not a small detail. Egypt was famous in the ancient world, specifically for its melon cultivation. Melons are over 90% water, making them one of the most effective hydrating foods available, alongside meaningful amounts of vitamin C and potassium. In hot, arid climates, that combination genuinely mattered for preventing dehydration and electrolyte loss. Traditional use. Eaten fresh in the heat of the day, and the seeds, often discarded today, traditionally dried and eaten for their protein and mineral content. 9. Mulberry. Mulberry trees appear in 2 Samuel chapter 5, where God instructs David to wait for the sound of marching in the tops of the mulberry trees before attacking the Philistines. A moment of divine timing tied directly to this tree. Mulberries are rich in anthocyanins, the same pigment-based antioxidants found in blueberries, along with resveratrol and meaningful iron content. Research on mulberry leaf and fruit extracts has explored effects on post-meal blood sugar response, an area of ongoing study particularly in East Asian traditional medicine, which has used mulberry for centuries. Traditional use. Eaten fresh when in season, they spoil fast, or dried for extended shelf life and used in traditional teas. 10. Sycamore fig. This is a different fruit from the common fig. The sycamore fig tree is specifically what Zacchaeus climbs in Luke chapter 19 to see Jesus. In Amos chapter 7, the prophet identifies himself as a tender of sycamore figs, a detail that tells us how ordinary and widespread this fruit was for working people. Nutritionally, sycamore figs are lower in sugar than common figs, but carry a comparable fiber and mineral profile. And in traditional Middle Eastern and East African use, the milky latex from the tree has been applied topically to skin irritations, similar to the common fig, though with less modern research behind it specifically. Traditional use. Eaten fresh by laborers and travelers as an accessible, low-cost food source, exactly as Amos describes. 11. Almond. God instructs Moses to design the temple lampstand with cups shaped like almond blossoms, Exodus chapter 25. Later, in Numbers 17, Aaron's staff miraculously buds and produces almonds, becoming a symbol of divine authority. Almonds are exceptionally nutrient-dense. 1 ounce provides roughly 37% of the daily vitamin E requirement, a fat-soluble antioxidant that protects cell membranes, plus high magnesium content, a mineral a large share of modern diets fall short on. Clinical trials have shown regular almond consumption is associated with improved LDL cholesterol and better post-meal blood sugar control. Traditional use, raw or lightly roasted as a daily food, ground into paste for cooking, and pressed for oil used in traditional skincare. 12. Walnut. The Song of Solomon chapter 6 verse 11 describes going down to the garden of nuts. Most scholars identify this as the walnut garden, prized enough to be worth a poetic journey. Walnuts stand out nutritionally for one specific reason. They're one of the only tree nuts with a meaningful amount of plant-based omega-3 fatty acids, specifically ALA, alongside polyphenols concentrated mostly in the thin skin surrounding the nut. Research has associated regular walnut consumption with improved markers of cardiovascular and cognitive health, though causation in humans is still an active area of study. Traditional use: eaten raw, pressed into oil, or ground into pastes used in traditional Middle Eastern cooking and folk remedies for skin conditions. 13. Pistachio. Here's the one I teased at the top. When famine hits in Genesis chapter 43, Jacob instructs his sons to bring the Egyptian official a gift substantial enough to represent the family's honor, and pistachios make that short list, alongside myrrh and honey. In the ancient world, they were treated as a luxury, not a snack. What makes pistachios genuinely stand out today is their concentration of lutein and zeaxanthin, carotenoids linked to eye health that are relatively rare in nuts, plus a prebiotic fiber effect. Several studies have found regular pistachio consumption increases beneficial gut bacteria, specifically bifidobacterium, more than most other nuts tested. Traditional use: eaten raw as a prized, portable food, and historically given as a formal gift, exactly as Jacob understood their value thousands of years ago. 14. Carob/locust bean. Matthew chapter 3 verse 4 describes John the Baptist living in the wilderness on locusts and wild honey. For centuries, scholars have debated whether locusts here refers to the insect or to the sweet, bean-like pods of the carob tree, known throughout the region as St. John's bread. Either reading is defensible, but the carob theory has real botanical support, since the tree grows wild exactly where John ministered. Carob pods are roughly 50% natural sugar, but carry an unusually high fiber content, up to 40% by dry weight, most of it insoluble, which is why carob has traditionally been used as a gut regulator for both diarrhea and constipation. It's naturally caffeine-free and contains condensed tannins studied for antimicrobial activity. Traditional use: pods eaten raw as a sweet, filling food, or ground into flour. A genuine wilderness survival food either way you read the text. 15. Citron. Etrog. The citron doesn't appear by that exact name in most English translations, but it's widely understood among scholars to be the fruit of goodly trees, specified in Leviticus chapter 23 verse 40 for the Feast of Tabernacles, one of the few fruits given an explicit ceremonial role in the entire Old Testament. Citron is almost entirely thick, fragrant rind with very little juice, and that rind is where the value lies. It's rich in essential oils and flavonoids, and has a long history in traditional Mediterranean and Middle Eastern medicine as a digestive aid, typically candied or infused. Traditional use: the rind candied, preserved, or infused into oil. The fruit itself was valued far more for its peel and fragrance than for eating out of hand. 16. Apricot. Many scholars now believe the apple of Proverbs chapter 25 verse 11, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold, is actually a mistranslation, and the fruit intended is the apricot, which was widespread and golden-colored across the region in a way apples simply weren't. Apricots are rich in beta-carotene, the precursor to vitamin A, along with potassium and fiber, and dried apricots concentrate iron significantly. Research has associated diets high in carotenoid-rich fruit with better markers of skin and eye health over time. Traditional use: eaten fresh in season, or dried into a shelf-stable food that could be stored for months, a practical necessity in a climate with a short harvest window. 17. Quince revisited, the marriage fruit. Quince deserves a second look here, because in ancient Hebrew and later Jewish tradition, it's specifically associated with fertility and marriage blessings, separate from its appearance in Song of Solomon. Beyond the pectin content covered earlier, quince seeds specifically have been used traditionally, steeped in water, to create a soothing mucilage applied to sore throats and irritated skin, a folk remedy still practiced in parts of the Middle East and Central Asia today. Traditional use: the seed water preparation for throat irritation, and the cooked fruit as a traditional gift at weddings and betrothals. 18. Watermelon. Watermelon sits alongside melons in that same wilderness lament in Numbers 11. Proof that Egypt's reputation for produce extended to this fruit specifically. Watermelon is one of the richest natural sources of citrulline, an amino acid studied for its role in blood vessel function, along with lycopene, the same antioxidant found in tomatoes, present here in a form the body appears to absorb efficiently. Traditional use: eaten fresh for hydration in extreme heat, and in some traditional Middle Eastern practices, the rind pickled rather than discarded. 19. Cucumber melon, kishuim. Rounding out the numbers 11 list is what's translated as cucumbers. Almost certainly a smaller, sweeter melon variety than what we call a cucumber today, since true cucumbers weren't well established in Egypt at that time. Whatever the exact variety, this fruit shared the same hydration and mineral profile as its melon relatives, and its inclusion by name in a list of foods people wept over in the desert tells you exactly how central fresh produce was to daily life along the Nile. Traditional use: eaten fresh, sliced, and often paired with herbs, a preparation still common across the eastern Mediterranean today. 20. The vine, wine and grape, revisited. And here we are at number 20, the one I saved for last because it ties this entire list together. The grapevine appears in Scripture more than any other plant, over 500 times. Jesus calls himself the true vine in John chapter 15. Wine is used at the Passover table, at the wedding at Cana, and Paul tells Timothy directly, use a little wine for your stomach's sake. 1 Timothy chapter 5 verse 23. This is the one place on the list that genuinely requires nuance, because Scripture treats wine as medicine used in moderation, never as something to be used without restraint. It warns against excess repeatedly and explicitly. Diluted wine, which is largely how the ancient world consumed it, has documented antimicrobial properties against common pathogens, and the polyphenols concentrated in grapeskins, the same resveratrol we covered at number 5, are part of what researchers point to in the so-called French paradox: comparatively lower rates of heart disease in populations with high-fat diets but regular, moderate red wine intake. The key word in Scripture and in the research is the same: moderation. One small glass, with food, as part of a whole diet, not as a habit disconnected from everything else on this list. 20 fruits. Thousands of years of use. The people who wrote these ancient texts weren't primitive. They were observant. They paid close attention to what sustained them and what made them sick, and they built their agriculture, their diet, and even parts of their worship around those observations. And now, with peer-reviewed research and clinical trials, we keep arriving at conclusions that echo what they already knew. Olive oil reduces inflammation. Pomegranate supports cardiovascular markers. Figs support gut health. The text was right more often than we give it credit for. It just didn't explain the mechanism, because the mechanism wasn't the point to the people writing it down. If you want the specific sourcing I trust for high-quality versions of these foods, the real cold-pressed oils, the real raw honey heirloom fruit tree varieties if you want to grow your own, I've linked everything I actually use in the description below. Drop a comment and tell me which fruit on this list surprised you most. I read every single one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button and ring the bell. We post a new one of these every week, and we're just getting started. See you in the next one.